Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome back to our Houston Sharpshooters Draft to Glory franchise mode here in NHL 22. So in last episode, we had the entire offseason, and we got some really good growth from our young guys, and we also drafted quite well. And I think our team is going to have our best season yet this upcoming year, which is good because obviously the last 3 years or so, we've been staying right around 30 wins. But this year, I feel like we could probably hit 35 wins or just miss out on the playoffs. The reason being is because we actually have a legitimate like 3 lines almost on our roster. Like our center core is definitely still a little bit weak, but once guys like Burns and Pasquale grow a little bit more, this team is actually going to be a little bit more legit. And yeah, like basically our top 6 looks really solid. Our third line looks pretty decent. Our fourth line is pretty much our weak point on the team, but I do still think these young guys should do decent because they actually fit the line pretty good for the most part. Like Turson By might be the worst fit for this team, but I think this team should do pretty decently. Now, defense is also probably going to be still a little bit problematic, but I think it should improve upon last year, which is good because Yip is growing into a 78 and he's an actual NHL defenseman, while these other 3 are still not great enough, but Reed Roach is probably going to be like a 79 or 78 at some point as well, I would assume. And then our goaltending combination is looking pretty good as well. Soderstrom and Johnson. Soderstrom is actually listed as a backup, so we actually have a legitimate NHL goalie as well, which is good news. And yeah, basically our team looks like it might end up missing the playoffs by not too much. Like we might end up not having a top 5 pick for the first time, which would be pretty awesome as well. Before we start the simulation, we do have a few comments to go over. So the first one is from Mike Garbrand. He says, fix your scouting before you start the sim. Plus, I don't think line chemistry does anything in game or in sim. I could never tell the difference in gameplay or sim. Say if you had a +5 line to a +1 line, feels like it was just an add-on. Now, I kind of get what you say. I think chemistry does matter to an extent, but it's also kind of like a combination of the players' overalls and stuff like that, so it's a little bit of a mix between the two. Because, for example, like, let's just say this fourth line, it doesn't have a negative chemistry, but it still might not be good together because of the overalls. While this line, since it has +3 chemistry and good overalls, this line should simulate decently. So I think it really depends on the player overalls and it also a mix of the chemistry itself too. So hopefully with our good chemistry that we have, hopefully this team does pretty well because like we have good chemistry throughout our special teams, and I think it's probably the best chemistry I've ever had on a franchise mode team, which is kind of crazy considering this is just a draft to glory. The next comment is from Oxfan88. He says, I think the team will just miss the playoffs this year. Defense is still kind of weak, which I think that's probably our main problem going into the season, as I was just mentioning, is just the defensive core a little bit. But if Yip could get some good growth this year, I think next year we'll have an actual better defensive core. And then like Hedman and stuff like that should be decent as well. Teratukin might be even higher overall wise. And yeah, maybe it'll be a good year next season. Next comment is from Jeff Prelinsky. He says, sign Hedman. Team looks great. Dark horse for the playoffs. So yeah, we're definitely going to give Hedman an extension before we actually start simulating because he is on the last year of his ELC. I am going to give him an 8-year deal because what he wants for 8 years is actually a legitimate steal. So we are going to try and get him for 8 years locked up. And that will give us one of our best defensemen for a long-term deal just with Teratukin. And then the final comment is from Jake Barabo. He says, this is going to be the best season yet for this team. Great chemistry and hot take. Going to have a top 10, maybe even top 5 power play. So he's saying our power play might be top 5, which I think that power play unit, actually the first one especially, looks really good. It's interesting because Morales gets thrown to the second unit, which I guess I'm okay with, but every single unit has a lot of chemistry, which is good. So yeah, hopefully that power play is a top 5 power play, maybe top 10, because that would be a good thing for our offense especially. And hopefully our penalty kill also simulates well because our penalty kill also has some good chemistry alongside it. So that would be pretty nice if that could also get into the top 10 somehow. But those were the comments I got in the last episode. So before we start simulating, let's give a contract to Hedman so he can get his 8-year extension. And then we'll start simulating and hopefully he accepts the extension that we're going to offer him. We're going to probably wait on C-Doo till the off season because we did only just re-sign him for 1 more year. But I think in the offseason we could re-sign him for like maybe a 5 or so year deal because he hasn't been that great of an offensive player so far. But Hedman, basically for 6 years, he wants only 6.5. But if you go up to 8 years, he only wants 6.725, which is pretty good. And we are also going to be trying the 85% trick, I think, because the 85% trick would get us down to giving him like $5 million, I think, if my math is correct. So let's try and get him for 85% of this, which would be pretty nice. So let's try and get him for 5.55, I think, would basically be the lowest we could probably offer him. Let me see. I can maybe get him for 4.75, but I'm going to just do 5.5 for 8 years because that would be a really good steal of a contract for a defenseman. Like, he might not grow much based on the salary asking price, but if he stays like an 84 and paying him 5.5, that's pretty good, I think. So we'll offer him that extension, and that's pretty much all we'll do to start up the season sim. And yeah, now let's get started with the season sim and get into this, because I already actually went ahead and did what my Garbrandt said about assigning the scouts to their respective leagues. So those are all good and ready to go. So let's sim the season and see how this team performs, see if we could get more than 30 wins for the first time in franchise history. I'm going to say we're going to get maybe like 35 to 40 wins, somewhere around that range. Let me know your guys' predictions down below. And Hedman is rejected, so I guess he's going to want a little bit more than that. So let's try and get him still, because we do need to lock him up, because if it comes to the offseason and he has a good year this year, he's going to be asking for a lot more. So let's see what he wants now for 8 years. For 8 years, he wants $7 million. I'm still going to lock him up, I think. Let's give him 6.225 for 8. I think he should probably accept that. I hope he does, because he is a core piece of this future, I think, on the back end especially. Let's send him to the regular season just to see if he accepts, and he has accepted. So there we go, 8 years at 6.225. That's a pretty good contract. And yeah, I pressed him to regular season, so that means it's going to sim through preseason, but that is whatever. How did we even do in the preseason? Let's take a look at that quickly just for fun, and then we'll sim the seasons. So preseason wise, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins. We went like 5-2, I think, which is pretty damn good. I think that might be our best preseason yet. So let's sim up to April the 9th and see how this team does. Can we get 35 wins or so on the season, or more than that? Or can we just miss the playoffs, something like that? Because Jeff Brelinski, the guy that commented, he also has been doing a draft to glory, and he made the playoffs for the first time in like 2030, which we are getting pretty close to. And we're actually starting off with a above 500 record, which is nice, but still losing some games by quite large margins because our defense is still not that great yet. As long as it improves upon last year, because last year we allowed over 3 goals a game. But we are still above 500 right now, which is really good to see this early on, but yeah, we're definitely not going to be a bottom 5 team, I think, this year. At the rate we're winning games this early on. We're 12-9-2 so far. But there's like terrible games where we played really bad defensively, where we allow like 8 or 9 goals. Like, if we get into the playoffs at some point, we might end up being like a first round exit, and then hopefully the next year we could make it farther than that. But there's a couple more losses. Yeah, we're kind of struggling a little bit as of late, but we're still keeping up with the wins, which is a good sign. This is definitely going to be our best season yet, like you guys are mentioning, easily. Unless for some reason we just drop all the rest of the games of the season, which we kind of are doing right now. 19-19-6, okay. I want to have at least 35 wins this year. Also, this year is kind of a write-off in a sense. But 20-20-7, still staying 500. Yeah, it seems like we're not going on long losing streaks. Like, we usually bounce back after one loss with a win, which is a good sign. And all those extra frame losses as well might help us out in terms of points. So that's good, because we're 25-23-10 right now, which is kind of a weird record. And there we go. So trade deadline wise, let's just go, we're just going to go seller, and we're going to go continue simulating. But we are 27-24-11 at the deadline, which is pretty good. No, we're not claiming anybody on waivers like Vincent Trocheck, because we like our drafted players, and that's all we like. 28 wins on the season, so we are very close to beating our franchise best. Can we get our 30th win here, or are we just going to drop every single game now? We're dropping a lot of games as of late. That's not good. That's a losing streak that I didn't want to see. Come on, boys. There's, you go, 30 wins. We don't get there. There's 31 wins. That's our best season yet by only 1 win. Okay, so it wasn't that great of a season still, but all those extra frame points is definitely going to help us in the standings. But still, I would say definitely our best season yet by only a little bit. We finished with 74 points this year, which was better than the Blues in our division. Let me just get the rest of the season simulated. There you go. So 74 points. So we finished above the Blues. We finished above the Flames. And that was it. So we still finished like bottom 5 in the league, which is not great. But, I mean, it's probably close in terms of how close we were to the bottom of the league. Looks like our offense kind of slowed down a bit as well this year by comparison to last year, as Jääskeläinen led us with 81 points. Let's start by looking at our team stats, and then we'll take a look at our player stats for the season. So, in terms of the entire league, we were the 4th worst team in the NHL with 74 points, but we were pretty close to Vegas and LA. There's a good chance that we are still going to have a top 5 pick, which is not great because I don't really want to have more top 5 picks, or else we might run into cap problems with elite players and stuff like that, but at least it means another good prospect in for next year. Maybe on the defensive core, who knows? Probably on the defensive core or bottom 6. So there's that. Goals for per game. We were not a good offensive team this year, so that's probably... It could be because we got a new youngster in that centerman. Maybe he kind of just didn't work well with the chemistry as much as we hoped. But at 2.85 goals for per game, that's not good enough. Goals against per game wise, we were not the worst defensive team in the NHL, so that is definitely a step up. We're better defensively than we were. Our offense definitely took a hit though, so hopefully we could get that offense back to the way it was like last year, and hopefully that defense could continue to improve. Power play percentage wise, we had the best power play in the league, so Jake, you are absolutely correct. We had the best power play in the league. You said we were gonna have like a top 10 or top 5 power play. Well, we had the best one in the league, 24.9%. Probably all because of that top unit, so I guess we scored on the power play, but we didn't really do much 5-on-5, which is not great. So that's interesting. And our penalty kill percentage, let's see about this. Our penalty kill was actually one of the best as well in the league, so we had really good special teams this year, which is really good to see. We just need to get better at 5-on-5, 85.7%. Damn. 6 short-handed goals this year as well, which was probably top 15 in the league. And what was our home record and stuff like that? 15, 21, and 5. The road record was not that bad, 16, 18, and 7. But we were 2, 8, and 0 in our last 10 games. Or else we could have had an even better season than 31 wins. But still not a bad season by any means. But hopefully we do not get anybody super good in the draft, because or else, well, yeah, cap-wise is going to be a problem in a few years when ELCs are done and guys like Morales' contract are over. Let's take a look at our player stats for the season. So starting off with our centers, Jääskeläinen, 81 points in 82 games. Only minus 15, which is not too bad. That was not his best season because, like I said, last year he was pretty good and our offense was pretty good. But this year he kind of struggled a bit. Still a lot of power play points, though, from him. Up to 516 points in 574 games. He's already 25 years old, which is kind of crazy. Chad Burns in his first season, not too bad, 42 points through 82 games, only a minus 7 as well, so good stuff from the two-way forward. He's an 80 overall currently. It's not too bad. Got some power play points, and he also had 3 shorthanded goals in his first season, so that's really good stuff to see from Chad Burns. And then continuing on with our center points, we have Pete Pasquale, 34 points this year. He's still kind of a weak link in terms of playing defensively. It's probably because he's got 71 defensive awareness. But I really hope we could find some replacements for some of our centers on that bottom 6, because he's not great. He puts up a decent amount of points, but his plus-minus is terrible. And in Tursenbayev, 13 points in a minus 36. He's still a 75. I was hoping he'd get a little bit of development this year, but it doesn't seem like he did. As for left wingers, Gene Thornton, 74 points this year. A little bit of a bad season for Gene to an extent. Like, he did put up a decent amount of points, but he isn't scoring that 40 goals that we really need him to every year. So, a little bit of a downfall, but still pretty solid. Seadoo, 62 points, so a good bounce-back season from Sam Seadoo. That's his best season of his career so far, so we'll probably have to sign him long-term or somewhat long-term in the offseason. Not 100% sure how much we should give him and how much term. Morales really dropped off in production. Could be because he was moved from the first unit to the second unit, but on the power play, but still not a good sign at all. He's pretty inconsistent. 83 points, then 55, 82, then 53. So yeah, his production's starting to drop off, and he was the first ever player we drafted in this franchise mode. He is signed for 3 more seasons only, and then his contract is done. So hopefully he doesn't continue to drop off in production, or else he might be on his way out at some point. Forster's still pretty good, 35 points in 82 games. He's only an 83. That's still pretty good. He is still signed for 2 more seasons at 2.39, and then he's probably going to want more money, I would assume. Kapitanov only 49 points, so it seems like this elite guy isn't assimilating that well either. But he's a little bit slow to start off with, but hopefully he could start scoring more goals. Interesting. He's up to an 86, so that's pretty good. Goldobin, 23 points. He's one of our weaker players. He's still not good. We definitely need to find replacements for some of these guys. Korostin, 16 goals. He's dropping off in production as well by a landslide. And he's still signed for 1 more season at 4.3, which is not great. And Lannon, 74 still, and he's still not putting up a lot of points. So definitely those right wingers we still need to improve for sure. Defensively, though, Teretukin, 62 points this year from the defenseman. That's the best season of his career. Glad we have him locked up for a long-term deal. And then we just locked up Hedman, 33 points this year from him, and a minus 18. Still an 84 overall. But, yeah, he's not a huge offensive producer, but he is still a good player to have on our back end. Roger Turris, 19 points, not too bad. Yip, 17 points in his first season. He is still a 78, which is kind of bad, but hopefully he gets some more development through the offseason. And then Christopoulos is still one of our weak links, and Roach was not that great. He is up to a 77, though, so he's almost an NHL defenseman. And goalie-wise, Soderstrom won majority of his games almost, or got points in majority of his games. 27, 28, and 10 with a 903 and a 334, so that's pretty good. While Janssen really struggled, 413 and 2 with 1 shutout, an 882 and a 426. So we definitely need to find still goalies that could play backup to Soderstrom to help us out a little bit. So that is that. Let me just take a look and see if any of our players finished in like the top 10 in terms of points and stuff like that. So forward-wise, not even close. McDavid had the most, and then Cole Sillinger, interesting. Most goals this year, Matthews, not a surprise. Best defenseman this year was Hughes. Teretukin, though, finished 3rd in points among defensemen, so he almost won at Norris, which would have been pretty crazy on a team that missed the playoffs, but that plus-minus probably would have hurt him anyways. So I feel like he'd be more like 4th or 5th in terms of Norris voting, maybe. And then goalie-wise, the best goalie this year was Igor Shesterkin at 44 wins. Best rookie this year was Brendan Wells with 61 points. But our boy Chad Burns finished top 10, which is pretty nice to see. So that is that. Let me take a quick look at the AHL stats for our AHL team, which is down there in Burnaby, I think. Yeah, Burnaby. Let's take a look and see if any of our guys down there got some good development or not. So Zubov seems like he played really good in the AHL, but he's not good enough to be an NHL player, which kind of sucks. Ortiz was pretty good, and he's jumped up to a 71, so that's really good to see because we definitely want him in the lineup as soon as possible. He might end up getting into the bottom 6 sometime next season. Strudwick, not that great. He's still a bottom 6. The lowly jumped up to a 70. Duke Ferraro, that's good to see as well. He might be in the NHL at some point. And yeah, Vermette's still a bottom 6, so not really anything. Aegon, really good AHL numbers, but probably not NHL number-wise. Sidor, not terrible, up to a 71 at 21. And Holloway's really not anything down there as well. Seaback-wise, 75 points this year from Seaback. He was in the NHL last year, I think. Wasn't he? No, he was in the NHL a few years ago, but he hasn't really gotten a chance to play at the NHL level. He's good at the AHL level in terms of putting up points, but I don't think he would be that at the NHL level. Bengtsson, the low top 6, is a 68, which is pretty solid. Not too bad. Defensively, any good growth? McIver's up to a 71. I'll take that, but he's 23 already. Ozunch is a 72 at 22. That's not great, but still, I'll take it. Schutz is still a 68 at 21, which kind of sucks. I hope this Lowly can get some more development. And yeah, that's pretty much that. Afanasenkov's is 71 at 20. That's not terrible. And then the goalies are still not growing much more than what they are, which kind of sucks. Interesting. Okay, so that is our player stats and team stats and the season simulations. So let's sim up until the draft and stuff like this to see where we're drafting. We'll take a look at the draft class and all that. And I think that'll be pretty much for this episode at that point. Did the AHL team make the playoffs? No, they didn't. Okay, I thought the AHL team might have made the playoffs. I was going to be a little bit surprised there. because obviously with the draft glory, it's kind of hard to make the playoffs in any mode, or any league, I should say, because the AHL team is still not great, but it's doing decently, which is good to see. But hopefully we get some good stuff from our progress reports when we take a look at those. So let's go to view offers and go back to Houston, because that's all we do is stay in Houston. Boom. But who's going to win the Stanley Cup this year? Oh, it's the Blue Jackets. Interesting. And Belleville wins the OHL. Or not OHL, what the heck am I saying? The AHL. Oh, okay, let's take a look at those awards. So, awards for this season. So, Columbus wins the Stanley Cup. Ottawa won the President's Trophy. And it was Colorado Columbus for the Stanley Cup. Individual awards. McDavid wins the Art Ross. Sillinger the Hart. Hughes the Norris. Barzal the Bing. Go for Toronto wins the Calder. Sillinger also wins the Conn Smythe for Columbus. Spencer Knight in Winnipeg, interesting, wins the Vezina. Connor Hellebuyck in Ottawa wins the Jennings. Some guy named Riley wins the Masterton in Nashville. Bulleries for San Jose wins the Jack Adams. Zach Dean wins the Selke. That's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen him win the Selke before. And then Cole Sillinger to Lindsay and Austin Matthews to Richard. AHL award-wise, any awards for our AHL team down there? Probably not. Unfortunately not. That's not good, but whatever. So that is that, and now we find out where we are going to be drafting. Hopefully it's not a bad pick, and hopefully we could get something good for what we actually need on this team, like a defenseman or more bottom 6 players. And we have the 5th overall pick, so we fell back from 4 to 5, which is okay with me. I definitely will take still a 5th overall pick, but hopefully these players aren't going to be demanding too much money down the road, or else, like I said, the cap is going to be a bit of a problem. Okay, so that is good. Let's take a look at the player retirements briefly. We don't really care too much about this, but the bigger names, Kane, Stamkos, Tavares, etc. The big goalies to retire this year, Jake Allen, Korpisalo, that type of thing. Interesting. So that is that. Any coaches? John Tavares is now a coach. Interesting. Drew Doughty as well, and Steven Stamkos. And coach retirements, did we lose anybody? Probably not. No, it doesn't look like it. Yep, we did not lose a coach. That's good, because definitely we want to have our coaches that we currently have, which have been doing pretty good for us so far, I think. Okay, so we are up there at the draft. Let's take a look first at the contract situation, just to see who is up this offseason. You guys could let me know on what we should be giving these players for term and for contracts. So the big one is Sea-Doo. He wants $10 million for 4 years, which is a lot of money still. So I think we might just qualify him for another year and give him the lowest we could possibly give him. And then we'll continue, eventually we'll give him a long-term deal. But right now I don't really know if he's kind of worth it or not. So that's kind of an interesting one. Other guys that are up for renewal is Goldobin. He's wanting a one-way deal. A lot of these guys are going to want one-ways and their UFAs, which is the problem. So we might not be able to re-sign them right away, but we might be able to re-sign them if they're still available in free agency, which more than likely they will be, unless they drop their asking price and teams sign them that way. But yeah, pretty much everybody else here is going to be wanting a one-way deal. Ferraro's wanting a two-way deal, which is good, because hopefully he comes back and hopefully he gets to the NHL at some point. But yeah, these are all the guys that are up for renewal. And goalie-wise, the big one is Soderstrom, who's up to an 81 now. He wants $2.4 million. If we gave him an 8-year deal, he'd only want 3.5, which is not a lot. Jansson's not really been that great. I might end up letting him go, and then we could always run with somebody else, but we kind of want the best overall goalies possible in the NHL. Park is actually almost the AHL ready, so we should probably let go of a goalie to make room for him. And then unsigned guys, those guys that we drafted that we didn't sign in the last episode. Ladd is up to a 63, Rodriguez a 63, and Ramsey a 59. And Benson, that elite goalie we drafted as well, is up to a 53. I can't remember what he was when we drafted him. Maybe a 48 or something. Let's take a look at those progress reports, and then it'll come up to the draft class, which should be pretty interesting to see what we could go after. So development-wise, Burns is up to an 81. Afinosankov is a 72. Yeah, so we do have a good amount of growth. A lot of it's probably statistical-based, right? Some of it's natural growth from the guys in the AHL, but a lot of guys in the NHL are statistical, which kind of sucks. Because statistical, the players end up just dropping back off after 1 year. And in the system, that medium elite offensive defenseman is still getting really good growth. That's really good to see. Now let's sort this actually by overall. But yeah, it looks like some good AHL players are getting growth. That low lead is a 69, which is good. We might end up using him at the NHL at some point, and maybe he'll end up being better than expected. And yeah, that's pretty much that. Now let's take a quick look at that draft class, and then that'll be it for this episode. Just to see what is out there, because we do have 5th overall, which means we could get a defenseman at number 5, which more than likely we will do. Or we could get another center who's a top 6, but this guy's probably an elite defenseman. Might be offensive, because he's 5'10", 174. He's only 17, he's a right-handed defenseman, but he also plays left D, which is kind of weird. So yeah, Marcus Sedin might be our pick. I would say he probably is our pick. Or if for some reason Drury drops, obviously we'll take Drury because he's a power forward, and that's something we could use as well. Any guys that we should pin for late rounds? Any like low elites? There's a medium elite potentially in Parker who's 20. Probably not, but he looks like he's 2 years out, so I'm going to definitely pin him in case. Because he's probably not elite, but he's probably a guy with a good overall that could help us on that bottom 6. Any low elites though to pin for like round 7 doesn't really look like it. This guy doesn't look that bad though, so I'll pin him in case. Supposed to go right around the same point as that other dude. And there's a 3-year ETA. That's interesting. I'll pin him as well. Yeah, this draft class might not be that great to be honest, but we could still target some defensemen. And like I said, if we need to, we could probably get Drury if for some reason somebody else goes before him. So that is the draft class, and that is going to do it for this episode of our Houston Sharpshooters Draft to Glory franchise mode. So in next episode, we'll take it to the off season again and continue building up that team, and hopefully next season we could maybe get closer to 40 wins, because I was really expecting like 35 at least this year, but we really didn't do so. So let me know what you guys think down below, and I'll see you guys next time.